Savant, the story of Lee Aaron, an extraordinary young drummer who's overcome extraordinary problems to make his dreams come true. A savant is defined as a person with developmental difficulties who excels in one thing, just like the character played by Dustin Hoffman in the film Rain Man. Savant syndrome is often, though not always, associated with some degree of autism. This is the story of Lee Aaron Browning, who has overcome attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD to give it its acronym, obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, and Tourette syndrome to become a brilliant young drummer. My name's Ian Friedman, and I'll be following him as he travels to his first professional gig playing with the Ben Aitken Band in Liverpool's world-renowned Cavern Club. So Lee, why don't you tell me about the problems you've got?
Well, I have OCD, so that's the worst problem.
And what else do you have?
I have ADHD and Tourette's, and that's about it, really.
And you said that OCD is the worst. Why is it the worst?
OCD is very, very hard for me to relax on everyday life sort of thing. I find it much more harder to relax and enjoy life because of OCD, but I do try.
What form does OCD take with you? What does it do to you?
Like if I'm passionate about something, I'll get obsessed with it, and that's lots of people have said that's a good thing. But if it's a loved one, for example, I will obsess over somebody that I love, or obsess about something that I really like. But sometimes that's not always a good thing.
And is it true to say you'll obsess about little things, like where you left a T-shirt and things like that?
I used to really obsess over things like that, but OCD has gone now in a certain direction where I'll worry about, loved ones, for example, or I'll worry about where I'm going to be in my career or things like that.
And you once described to me, I remember we were in America and I lost my wallet. We found it again, but you said to me that OCD was that panic of having just lost my wallet. And it was like that all the time. Is it still like that?
Not as bad. It is sort of the same, but in different areas.
And what about the Tourette's? What form does that take?
Well, it used to be really bad when I was a child, but it's funny, but very funny because all the three illnesses. The first one was ADHD, second one Tourette's, and then the third one being OCD. But OCD now takes over my whole life, but in a good way and bad way. And
does the drumming help or not make any difference?
Well, drumming definitely is a good thing for me because it's the only thing I'm really, really exceptional at, I guess.
And what does it mean to you now that you're starting to succeed in your chosen career?
Awesome.
We are ordinary people. We live ordinary lives.
Lee can be very articulate when he chooses to be. His seeming reluctance to be drawn on his Tourette's and ADHD was actually because he's currently fixated on his OCD. For example, there's usually a large and loud ticking clock on the wall of the room where we recorded the interview you just heard. We took it down and put it in another room so it wouldn't be picked up on the recording. But just as soon as we'd finished, Lee had to put the clock back, spending several minutes getting it to hang at just the right angle. That's OCD. I've known Lee's parents since we were at school together, and therefore I've known Lee all his life. His journey from being pigeonholed as a naughty boy through being diagnosed with various problems to becoming recognised as one of this country's finest young drummers is both heartwarming and inspiring. It has led to Lee joining the Glen Aitken Band. We met at a McDonald's restaurant early on the morning of the 1st of June to begin the long journey up to Liverpool for Lee's first professional gig.
All the ordinary people who live extraordinary lives.
So Lee, how are you feeling? We're on our way out to Liverpool. How are you feeling about the whole thing?
Feeling a little bit freaked out, but I think it's going to be really interesting.
You nervous at all?
Yeah, pretty nervous, yeah.
You've got lots of time in the car to relax and just go through the CD and listen to what's going on. You think you'll be alright?
Yeah, I think I'll be fine, yeah. I mean, we had loads of rehearsals, so I think it's going to be cooking.
On drumming, what difference does that make in his life?
Well, it is his life and it is his world. It's something that he believes in. He's got a gift, fortunately, and one of the things that he did at home and still does, in the school environment, was tapping on the desks or knocking on the seats or banging with his hands and his fingers, and he was in perfect rhythm, very fast rhythm. And he started doing the drumming on bongos when we were on holiday in Jamaica, and that was it. We just thought, well, drums, bongos, anything with his hands and his feet, he was very happy with, and he just played for hours.
From coming with all those problems, where is he now academically?
Lee has shown a tremendous ability in playing the drums, so finding out what the person's talent is. We were very fortunate that we found out that Lee had an ability, and it's an innate ability. Probably he's one of the best drummers in the country, and had it not been for drumming, we may not have found out what he was good at.
Now, it's fair to say that I've known Barry and Cavell since before Lee was born, and I've seen them go through these problems from times of absolute despair to, how do you feel about him now? Proud?
Yeah, very proud. Constantly there are people coming up to him at the end of a gig and saying just how fantastic he is. A guy came up to me the other week, and I've heard this so many times before, but this one particular guy said, I've seen The Who play numerous times, he said, from the 60s and the early 70s, when Keith Moon was playing. He was recognised as one of the top drummers in the country. And he said he's faster, he's quicker, he's more inventive than Keith Moon. I think anybody that watches Lee play, if there are any musicians out there that want to come down and see him play, come down and see him play, and because he is just an awesome, fantastic player.
So we've got this forthcoming trip to play with the Glen Aitken Band in Liverpool. What does that make you feel like?
Well, I feel very proud indeed, because Glenn found Lee through the internet and recognised his talent, and Glenn is certainly a talent in himself. He's just cut an LP over in the States. He has Paul McCartney playing on the album, playing bass on the album, and for him to pick Lee as his drummer to promote his new forthcoming album is just fantastic, and I know Lee will be as professional as he possibly can be.
Let's take a minute to think about what we've just heard. Here we have a young man who started out being perceived as a badly behaved, socially inept little boy who was underperforming academically. Compare that with the situation today. He's recognised as one of the finest young drummers in the country, and has been selected from hundreds of drummers, many more experienced than Lee, to play in the Glen Aitken Band. Quite a journey. Yet that does not diminish the problems that he has. His mother's mention of Lee's need for order, a place for everything and everything in its place, reminds me of a standing joke among the musicians that Lee plays with, to the effect that when he becomes a rock god, he will go back to his hotel room after a gig and tidy it. So here we are now. We're actually standing outside the Cavern Club in Liverpool, and in a few hours you're going to be playing here. How does it feel?
Yeah, it feels really, really amazing, really. I'm really shocked that I'm actually here, to be honest.
You were saying earlier when we were driving up in the car that you were a little bit frightened. How do you feel? Still feel frightened?
I still feel pretty nervous, yeah. But I've got nothing to be nervous about, but I'm still nervous because it's a prestigious venue. And I've got a lot of people watching. I'd rather have a meal before we go on, actually, because I'm pretty hungry.
OK, let's see what we can do. Joining us for the day was Tony Evans, one of Lee's teachers from school days. Although Tony's actually a language teacher, he's also a keen musician and ran the swing band at Lee's secondary school. I asked him how long he'd known Lee.
I've known him since primary school. He sat with my daughter in her classroom next to her. So a number of years now, since he was about 7 or 8, I suppose.
But there was more of a function to it than that. You weren't just a parent, you were one of his teachers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When he came to secondary school, I was his form tutor, and he played in our swing band, which I was leading. He played for 5 years, and he was the centrepiece of the whole thing, really.
Did you recognise then that he had a particular talent?
Yeah, everybody knew who heard him round about the age of 10 or 11 that he was a bit of a genius, really.
And did you expect to be standing outside the Cavern a few years later, being interviewed for the radio about Lee?
Not that I would be interviewed, no. I'm pretty sure that he would be interviewed and that he would do great things, but I never dreamt that I would be standing here. It's fantastic, absolutely brilliant.
It says something for Lee that you would want to, all these years after he's left school, that you would want to come up and see him do his first professional gig.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. He's just a fantastic kid and brilliant talent and just such a likeable person. I think anybody who knew him would want to be standing here now, and it's a great privilege. It's an honour.
Tony is right in saying that Lee's a likeable person. Meet him once and you can't help but like him. But as always, there's another side to the story. Because of his OCD, he can also be intensely irritating. One of his coping strategies is asking bizarre questions. For example, a few years ago, when we were discussing something completely different, Lee, who'd been silent up to that point, suddenly asked, "Do you think you could fit George Bush inside my bass drum?" It was the end of the conversation as everybody around him collapsed laughing. Unfortunately, there wasn't time for Lee to have something to eat before the...
We were on a family holiday, and a couple of guys came up to us on a beach and threw a pair of bongos in front of Lee. We bought the bongos, and for the whole of the 2 weeks on holiday, Lee played the bongos. And it wasn't until we came home that my bass player, I play in a band, and my bass player said to me, "Have a listen to Lee playing those bongos." He said he's playing them with perfect rhythm. So we listened, and next thing he said is, "You ought to get him some drum lessons," which is exactly what we did. And he's proved to be just an outstanding drummer, a real talent.
How old was Lee when all this happened?
He was 8 years old.
So he's been playing the drums now since he was 8 years old?
Since he was 8, yeah, and practices probably about 4 or 5 hours every day.
That's some dedication.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I've never known anybody more dedicated to something than Lee is, and that clearly shows in his playing ability.
How much of that do you think is due to his OCD and his ADHD and those conditions?
Well, I think you've got to have a talent, first of all. The talent's got to be there. It plainly was with Lee, but I think it's obviously been helped by his OCD, whereas perhaps you or I would play the drums and say, well, that's near enough. Look, that's not good enough for Lee. He's got to go back in and get it so it's absolutely perfect.
And how does it feel to be here in the Cavern Club, especially your generation for whom the Beatles were so important, to be sitting here in the Cavern Club and waiting for Lee to play?
Absolutely fantastic. Dream come true for me. I sound like the pushy dad, but it's not that at all. It's from the age of 5, I was heavily influenced by the Beatles, and to be here now is just absolutely fantastic. And to be here with my old mate Ian as well is great. And to the anticipation of watching Lee play later on is just something I could only have dreamed about.
So there you have it. Lee's OCD and all his other problems are not only an obstacle in his way, a barrier to be overcome, they are at the same time, and in equal measure, the very thing that drives him and have contributed to the beginnings of his success. Barry is right. He had to have the talent in the first place, but I can't help but wondering what Lee would be doing now if he didn't have ADHD, Tourette's and OCD. And so at last the moment has come, and Lee is about to play professionally at the Cavern Club with the Glen Aitken Band.
I want to welcome this gentleman to my right back for his second straight international pop overthrow, but this year he brought the band up from London with him. He's an amazing singer-songwriter. Some of you heard them sound checks. You know what a voice he's got. He's got a new album coming out in 2 weeks called Extraordinary Lives, and it's he's so well thought of that none other than Sir Paul McCartney is actually playing on that record. So, I mean, you got to be a great musician to get Paul to agree to do that, and he certainly does live up to that, and this band is going to rock. So, let's get this afternoon started off just right. Would you please give a huge welcome to Glen Aitken.
I'm Glen Aitken. This is my really cool band of faithful followers, and it's a song called Just Know. Something disturbs me. These questions don't want to hear. Conversation, one way to go. Get out of here. These things you know, somebody else, and now it's time to let go.
walking tonight. Keep on walking to feel that my life is gonna find. Doesn't run through the world. I'm amazed that I will find all the ordinary people with extraordinary lives.
As soon as the set was over, I went backstage to get Glenn's feeling on how what was after all his gig had gone. Glenn, well done on a great gig. Of his first gigs go, how was that?
It was good. I think it was a great start for us. You know, we're a new band and we enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun. That's what we came up here for. You know.
You're gelling well together. Now, you took a risk with Lee. Lee being a young drummer at the front of his career. How do you think he gelled in?
He did great. He's got such an awesome talent. And I think he's got a great future ahead of him. And no, it was great. It's a comfortable feeling. And you know, 4 guys completely who didn't know each other, and just coming together. And we've had 3 rehearsals, and I think it went really, really well.
It was an awesome sound out front, let me tell you. How did you come across Lee in the first place?
Just on the internet. Just I was looking around for a drummer. I've worked with a few drummers, and they just weren't what I was looking for. And Lee sort of leapt out amongst the plethora of drummers who were, you know, and I admired his age for a start, and his talent at his age, and saw some live video. And for me, I love performing and playing, and to see someone playing live is so much better than in the studio, and that's what Lee was, you know.
So for you, the youth thing was a positive, not a negative?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm only, 23 now, so... So yeah, no, it was good to have someone young as well, and it's always great to to get a different perspective on things rather than getting a seasoned professional session drummer in. To get someone with a lot more passion and enthusiasm is a great choice, I think.
There was, of course, someone else's opinion who I wanted. I asked Lee how he felt now he'd got his first professional gig under his belt.
Feels really, really good. Really, really happy. Very tired. But yeah, the sound sounded great on stage, and the songs went great.
How do you think the gig went? You think it went well?
I think the gig went well, but I think that this next gig I will feel much more comfortable because I'll be gigging with them much more.
There was one last person I wanted to talk to about Lee. Simon Small is a professional guitar player who, as well as playing with the Glen Aitken Band, is a member of chart-topping band Chicane. So Simon, you've been a professional musician now for a number of years. How long have you known Lee, and how did you meet him?
Well, I've got to know Lee again recently, probably 5 years ago when I helped him out with a DVD to promote his drumming. But when I first met Lee, he was just a baby, and I was a whippersnapper myself at 17, playing in his dad Barry's band.
Did you think then that you'd be playing with him professionally?
No, I didn't. It didn't even cross my mind. I thought he might become a musician because of his dad's influence and the other guys in the band, but I didn't think I'd be playing with him.
And now that you have, now you've done your first gig with him, how does he shape up?
Very, very good. I mean, he's got freakish ability, and at, how old is he? 18? 19. Pretty promising for the future, and it's great to play with him, and he's always good to have a solid drummer behind you, and after the gig we've just done, that's how it felt.
So there you have it, a freakish ability, a promising future, and a 4-hour drive home, during which Lee was understandably hyper.